Picture this. It's a rainy Tuesday in 1967. The kettle's whistling. Your mum's in a headscarf and apron. Your dad's grumbling about the price of petrol. And the telly's only got 3 channels if you're lucky. You're standing in the kitchen, eyeing the last wagon wheel, and suddenly you hear it. Were you born in a barn? Ah, yes. The classic one-liners of British mums and dads in the 60s and 70s, sentences so sharp and memorable they've stayed with us longer than Decimalisation or the coal man. If you grew up in Britain during that golden era, you heard some version of these phrases. And if you didn't, well, buckle up for a journey through a time when phones had cords. Kids had manners mostly, and no one ever threw away a margarine tub. Here are 10 things every British kid heard at home in the 60s and 70s. Let's see how many you remember. If there's one sentence that united working-class households from Manchester to Margate, it was this. Dinner time wasn't a negotiation, it was a declaration of war between you and whatever was on that plate. Usually something suspiciously grey, overboiled, or coated in lumpy bisto. Brussels sprouts boiled to the point of collapse, mashed potatoes with the consistency of glue, and meat so tough it could have been used to resole your school shoes. Didn't like your peas touching. The mashed potato. Tough luck. You'd sit there until the sun went down and your food went cold because throwing food away was simply not done. The idea of being picky didn't exist. Food was fuel, and you were expected to be grateful for it. And don't you dare think of scraping it in the bin when mum's back was turned. She had eyes in the back of her head, and a sixth sense for sniffing out plate dodgers. You'd try and sneak a bit to the dog, but even he looked offended. What started as a fight over liver and onions often became a life lesson in thrift, respect, and iron-stomached endurance. No pudding until your plate was cleared, no exceptions, and you knew dessert was waiting. Roly-poly, Arctic roll, or, if you were really lucky, angel delight. And if you were cheeky enough to say you were full, well, you'd be met with the follow-up that still rings in our ears decades later. This line always came immediately after number 1, and it carried the weight of the entire Commonwealth on its guilt-tripping shoulders. Suddenly, your uneaten shepherd's pie wasn't just an act of defiance, it was a humanitarian crisis. You'd be scolded like you'd single-handedly insulted the Queen and the United Nations in one go, and you didn't even know where Africa was. You might have seen it on Blue Peter once, but now you were being made to feel personally responsible for global hunger because you didn't fancy mince with hard carrots. This phrase transformed food into politics. Waste not, want not was more than a motto, it was the law. Even if the cabbage had gone translucent and your gravy had congealed into a jelly-like state, you were eating every bite. Bonus points if it was followed by, eat it, or you'll be having it for breakfast. And they weren't bluffing. 1 cold fish finger and a limp chip at 7 a.m. And you learned your lesson. British childhoods weren't just shaped by rationing leftovers, they were built on them. The classic Saturday morning battle cradle, with the force of a sergeant major and the sharpness of dental fumes. While your friends were outside playing footy in the cul-de-sac or glued to multicolored swap shop, you were on your knees with a dustpan and brush, wondering if the floorboards actually could reflect human features. Your mum didn't want a clean room, she wanted a crime scene scrubbed of all evidence. Beds had to be made so tight you could bounce a coin off them. Toys had to be lined up like soldiers. Clothes had to be folded into perfect squares, like you were in boot camp. She'd say, "This isn't a hotel," as if you'd been requesting room service and continental breakfast, and heaven help you if she found a sweet wrapper behind the dresser, or a rogue sock that had rolled under the bed and mutated into a dust creature. That single sock could trigger an entire lecture on personal hygiene, laziness, and standards. And once it was spotless, what did she say? "Now don't touch anything. Cheers. Mum, thanks for turning my bedroom into a museum exhibit where I'm not even allowed to live." This one was the ultimate anti-sympathy warning, issued not out of concern, but as an insurance disclaimer, planning to climb a tree, slide down the banister, ride your Raleigh chopper like Evel Knievel off a broken ramp. The warning came in early. Don't come crying to me. It was the parental equivalent of, proceed at your own risk. What they lacked in first aid skills, they made up for in clairvoyance. They could foresee the scrape on your chin or the graze on your knee before it even happened. And when it did, the response was never cuddles and ice packs. It was, well, I told you, didn't I? This was the 70s. No helmets, no elbow pads, and definitely no mollycoddling. We walked off twisted ankles and learned first aid from St. John Ambulance posters, and if you cried, you were met with, you'll live. Or the legendary, do you want me to smack you so you've got something to cry about? Which, in hindsight, was completely mad, but it worked. Somehow, we survived with scabs on our knees and a strange respect for physics. Energy conservation, eco-awareness, no chance. This was pure, unfiltered working-class budgeting. Electricity was sacred. Lights left on in empty rooms were acts of economic sabotage. You could practically hear the electric meter clicking like a Geiger counter. Who's left this light on? Was less a question and more an accusation. You could be on the other side of the house and still get summoned for your crime against utility bills. The immersion heater. Don't even think about touching it unless you have a signed note from your mother and visible hypothermia. And during winter, it wasn't about turning on the heating, it was about layering up like you were trekking to the Arctic. Put a jumper on, sit on your hands, go stand by the oven. That's how we stayed warm and humble. Meanwhile, the telly stayed off until after tea, and your bedroom light stayed off even during revision. Why? Because the council don't pay for this electric. Even now, you probably turn off lights out of sheer instinct and hear your dad's voice echoing in your head. 6. You're not going out dressed like that, whether it was pouring with rain, snowing sideways, or sunny with a light breeze. One thing was certain, you were never dressed appropriately. Planning to leave the house in just your school jumper? Nope, wearing shorts in November. You'll catch your death wearing your favorite t-shirt in summer. Put a vest on underneath. There was a paranoia about drafts so powerful, you'd think the common cold was airborne poison. Your mum would dress you for Siberian conditions if the temperature dropped below 15 degrees. And on the rare occasion you brought your coat. You won't need that, but leave it at home. You'll wish you had. You couldn't win. You just learned to take the coat, tie it around your waist when out of view, and hope it didn't ruin your carefully chosen outfit, which she also didn't approve of. Closing parenthesis. But, fun fact, British kids in the 70s could regulate body temperature like Arctic wolves. Because being comfortable was never the goal, survival was. Let's be honest, TVs back then probably were dangerous. They buzzed, they clicked, they needed to warm up, and they emitted static that could knock a pigeon off a windowsill. But to us, they were magic. We were raised on Blue Peter, Bagpuss, The Clangers, Grange Hill, and Doctor Who, hiding behind the sofa when the Daleks appeared, obviously. And no matter how bad the reception was, we sat there transfixed. Until, of course, came the inevitable warning, back up, you'll ruin your eyesight. Funny thing was, the screen was only about 14 inches, half the picture was fuzzy, and we had to squint just to read the news ticker. Even funnier. That telly lived on a wheeled stand. And the remote control was you. You had to get up to change the channel, which only made the square-eyed threat more ironic. And if you were watching after school, you'd also hear, you'll rot your brain watching that rubbish. Spoiler, our brains are mostly intact, and we still remember the Thunderbirds theme better than our PIN codes. The trump card of every British parent. The ultimate conversation ender. You dared to question authority. Why can't I stay up? Why can't I go to Genesis? Why do I have to eat this? Answer, because, I said. So it was final. No argument. No discussion. Not even a facial expression is allowed unless you want another classic. Wipe that look off your face or I'll do it for you. They didn't need logic or reasoning. They had the voice. And somehow, it always worked. A line usually reserved for teenagers, particularly the ones who'd started growing sideburns and slamming doors. This was your parents' polite way of reminding you that independence was a privilege and you had exactly none of it, and if you pushed it further, you Think you're grown up? Start paying rent then. That's when you knew the conversation was over, and your only choice was to either move out and live on cold beans, or help Dad fix the gutter and pretend you were just joking. No matter how old you were, if you lived in the house, you lived by the rules, and if you didn't like it, there's the door. Of course, you weren't actually going anywhere. You still had your washing done and toast brought upstairs.